Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of IBD Heal, a podcast brought to you by High Carb Health. I'm your host, Shakul, and today our guest is the wonderful Chef AJ. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, Chef AJ has been on a plant-based diet for more than 40 years. So you have a lot of knowledge about how to live this lifestyle and do it sustainably for a long, long period of time. But before we go into your story, I had an interesting comment on one of my YouTube videos where the person was saying that a plant-based diet has zero nutrition. And if anyone who lives on a plant-based diet for more than 13 years is eating some animal products in their diet and they're hiding it. What do you have to say about that?
Oh my God. Now I could see somebody saying eating some junk food in their diet. Now I don't agree with that. It's been almost 45 years. And I can assure you, and I swear on, well, I don't have a child, that unless it was an accident at a restaurant, which it could happen, I suppose. I very rarely eat at restaurants. I have not eaten any animal products since September 1st, 1977.
Amazing. So we're going to learn a lot from Chef AJ about how to live this lifestyle. Chef AJ has an incredible story because I believe you were diagnosed with pre-cancerous polyps at one point in your life. So we'll talk about that, and maybe that was one of your motivators as well. And a big weight loss journey too. So how about I get you to introduce yourself briefly and then talk about your journey.
Thank you. Well, I'm Chef AJ, and I've been following a I like to say plant exclusive diet because I never liked the word plant-based, because to me that doesn't say anything, because plant-based, well, it's based in plant, it could be 51% plants and 49% junk food or 49% animal products. So I've been following what I call a plant exclusive diet for almost 45 years. September 1st, it'll be 45 years, but it wasn't always a healthy one. That's where the W in Whole Foods come in, because for the first 26 years, I was on a junk food or a vegetarian diet. That's how I got diagnosed with precancerous polyps in my sigmoid colon, because I wasn't eating any fruits and vegetables or fiber, which isn't a good idea whether you eat plants or animals, to just eat no fiber. That's just ridiculous. If I had known I was going to be in the public eye or write books, I would have documented this like with photo. I didn't know, that this was going to be my job. It just was something that happened to me along the way. But it was really how I became Chef AJ was because of the precancerous diagnosis. I had never, I never intended to be a chef. I had another job. I had another career. But when I was diagnosed with the precancerous polyps, where the doctor said if they weren't removed, they always turn into colon cancer. And I have a strong family history of it. I had a grandmother that died of it, and a lot of that colon cancer in my family. I had actually gone to culinary school just because I needed the food to taste better than it did at the healing center that I was at. I was like, I got to have more than sprouts. And then that's what happened. So in a way, it was a gift. Like at the time, I wasn't very happy about it. And I was, of course, worried. But that's where, this whole career and enthusiasm and passion for this and teaching others came about, was because I think the same happened with you guys, too. I mean, it was because of, a diagnosis, an illness. That's why the place that I went for healing, they don't call it a disease or an illness. You can't even say that. They call it a health opportunity.
Absolutely. I agree completely. It's your body sending you a signal that something's not right, and it gives you an opportunity to correct it. Now, some people can choose to correct it if they want to. Other people choose not to, and they kind of suffer through, or they miss out on that health opportunity, I guess.
Or some people choose to correct it by what are more conventional means, drugs and surgery. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes they're needed.
Absolutely.
But other people really like to look at the ways that some of us have used, where we use the plants, the whole plants, in healing our bodies, mind and spirit.
Absolutely. And you also have you're a published author, and you've got a few books out. I'm actually interested to talk to you about the dessert book that you've got out there, but because you were a restaurant making whole food plant-based desserts.
I really was.
That's amazing. But just going into your journey with weight loss and things like that, what did you learn about plant-based diets and healing as you went through that journey, dealing with the digestive issues, but also the weight loss journey that you went on?
Well, you know what, you can't really separate them, because we're going to get back to the important. I call it the F word, fiber, because the fiber is what caused the precancerous polyps. Eating the fiber was what caused them to mysteriously disappear, according to the doctor. You know, it's funny because he just didn't believe that you could heal from plants. He accused me of having surgery because when I went back 6 months later after following this really strict form of a plant exclusive diet without sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, no processed food, I went back and I had another sigmoidoscopy, and all the polyps that he had photographs of were gone. And he said that, you know, there's no explanation other than you had to have had them surgically removed. Well, no, that's not what happened. But the same thing was with the diet. One of the reasons I was obese was because I wasn't eating any fiber. And without fiber, you're never going to feel full. You're just not going to feel full.
Yeah, it's a fantastic diagram, isn't it? Where they show the 500 calories of the different food. And I'll put that up on the screen here, 500 calories of oil, and then meat, and then, beans and rice, and then, fruits and vegetables, which really fill your stomach up the most.
That's important, not just for health, but if you are somebody struggling with your weight, look at how much fiber you're eating. And my guess is that relative to, you're eating less fiber than you could be eating, because if you really just eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, it's really, really hard to be overweight, and it's almost impossible to be obese.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, let's have a more of a drill down into some of the concepts that you teach people about, living healthy and losing weight and improving their digestion and things like that. What are some of the main things that you talk about, and what are people going to learn as they go through your books and things?
Yeah, well, different books, different things, but the weight loss book, I think really what I focus on is something called calorie density, which was a new concept to me when I learned it in 2011. And it's not that it hadn't been around before, because if you really look into some of the best-selling plant-based books from a long time ago, there was one written, I think it might have been as early as 1980, by Dr. Dean Ornish, called Eat More, Weigh Less. That's calorie density. There was one by Dr. John McDougall called the McDougall Program for Maximum Weight Loss. That is calorie density. I just happened to learn it in person at the True North Health Center from Dr. Doug Lyle and Dr. Alan Goldhammer in the classes that I was taking. But it was a mind-blowing concept to me, because you're taught, or some people are taught, that to lose weight you have to eat less food. And calorie density is actually the opposite, because you can actually eat a lot more food when you understand that food has different relative calorie densities. And people get calorie density confused with counting calories. And that's a big mistake, because we don't want you to have to count anything: calories, carbs, points, or weigh and measure your food on a plate. You just have to understand that all foods have a certain number. Your country probably uses liters, but in the United States, it's per pound, calories per pound of food. And the reason this is important is because the person that really discovered the most about calorie density, at least she did the most research on calorie density, her name is Dr. Barbara Rolls. And she has a laboratory at Penn State University where she studies human eating behavior. And she discovered in these experiments on people, legitimate experiments, people were, agreed to do this, that people eat approximately the same amount of food per day by weight. Now, that doesn't mean that you and I eat the exact same amount, or a bodybuilder, or a football player, but that usually people eat about 3 to 5 pounds of food per day. That's how much we need to feel full and satisfied. When you eat less food, you get more hungry, and most diets require to use an extraordinary amount of willpower to eat less food. But when you understand that foods have a caloric density ranging from about 100 calories per pound, which is non-starchy vegetables, to 4,000 calories per pound, a 40-fold difference, which are processed oils. If you understand the average calorie density of just a few food groups, you don't change how much you're eating, you change what you're eating. And so I love how Dr. Doug Lyle, one of the co-authors of The Pleasure Trap, says people aren't overweight because they eat too much food. They're overweight because they had too many calories, because we evolved a species of a caloric density of about 700 calories per pound. That's what we ate, was fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 calories per pound. Yes, our ancestors ate a little bit of meat, it wasn't like factory farmed meat, and they weren't eating it every day because they didn't have weapons and they didn't have refrigeration. So they had some meat, which averaged about 1,000 calories per pound. And then these seasonal high fat plant foods, nuts, seeds, and avocado, which they weren't eating every single day, because they thought they had an omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. They did get into into some honey occasionally, which was 1,800 calories per pound. But the average calorie density of the species was about 700 calories per pound. But we've learned to process food. And what happens is we make a food more calorically rich and nutrient poor when we process it. So take olives, for example. I don't remember if olives are 400, 500, or 600 calories per pound, whatever they are, but olive oil is 4,000 calories per pound. It's 10 times as calorically dense. Corn on the cob, corn is about 500 calories per pound. You eat a pound of corn, if you could, you're going to be feeling really full. But corn oil is 4,000 calories per pound. Beets, the vegetable beets, are about 195 calories per pound. But you process it into sugar, it's 1,800 calories per pound. Okay, let's just take something like grapes. Grapes are only about 200 calories per pound, but you dry them into raisins, which are still healthy, but now they're 1,300 calories per pound. So anytime you remove the water from the food, or you remove the fiber from the food, or the water and the fiber, what happens is you greatly increase the caloric density, but you also decrease satiety. And that's why you want to have your whole food eaten whole, intact. And it's not to say you can never like have juice or have raisins. No, not at all. But you just have to understand that whole food from a plant, eaten whole, not manufactured in a plant, is the ticket for optimal health, longevity, and especially if you're struggling with your weight. We didn't eat bread is like 1,500 calories per pound. And it's not to say it's not, certain breads are more healthy or that you can never eat bread. But if you're struggling with your weight, it's better off to eat the whole grain, which is only 500 calories per pound, instead of the bread, which is about 1,500 calories per pound. And so these are just to understand. People say, well, what are, these crackers are healthy, or air pop popcorn, or it's not so much that they're unhealthy, but they're calorically dense, because when there is no water in the food, you don't get that same satiety, because water plus fiber together makes bulk, and bulk is what satiety. Sort of, you can imagine like a sponge, a dry sponge, you put it in water, it expands. That's what water and fiber together do to your food. And Dr. Rolls really did a lot of research on water, because she discovered it's the water in the food. So in other words, people say, well, I'll just eat a lot of dry crackers, but I don't drink a lot of water. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't just eat a lot of raisins and then drink a lot of water. It doesn't change the caloric density. It has to be in the food, which is why soup is one of the best things for weight loss. And see, by itself, water exits the digestive tract too quickly, but when it's bound to the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains and the legumes, which are cooked in water, then it just makes you feel full, and makes you feel full on fewer calories. And so when you understand calorie density, it can be a real game changer.
Soups are amazing for digestion too, because the more water you have intact with the food, it really passes through your bowel easier. Great for people who've got constipation and things like that. It just gets things moving in the body. So, okay, in terms of the weight loss topic, what would you say are the three like major myths that you hear about when you're talking to people, or you're seeing comments and things like that on YouTube? I'm sure you get a lot of comments on your YouTube channel. What are the three major myths you see about weight loss?
I can't eat carbs. They make me fat. Oh my God. If you think as a 45-year vegan, you think, I would say that if I had a nickel every time somebody said, where did you get your protein? No, I'll take a nickel for every time I say, I can't eat carbs. They make me fat. Yeah, really? Okay. Well, tell that to like, the Okinawans that, in the blue zones that eat, I think something like 72% of their calories from sweet potatoes. I don't think they got the memo. Carbs do not make you fat. Potatoes especially are 1 calorie per gram, but people still believe that, because they'll be on a weighing and measuring program, or they'll be on a keto program, and then they eat a carb and the scale goes up. Yes, but because the scale goes up didn't mean you gained fat. You now have some glycogen in your muscles and liver, and water in your tissues, because when you were on a low carb diet, you weren't doing that. I mean, people think because the scale moves quickly that they're losing fat, when they're not. They're mortgaging their health in the short term, in the long term, for weight loss in the short term. But potatoes cannot make you fat. What you put on the potatoes can, the butter, the cheese, sour cream, the bacon, frying them in oil with a bunch of salt. Yes, all the people that have eaten nothing but potatoes have lost weight. And example, you said you were in Australia. Well, there is a person in Australia named
One of my
Andrew
best mates.
And
Yeah.
guess what? He ate nothing but potatoes for 1 year, and he lost more than my weight, lost 120 pounds, and helped reverse depression and his food addiction. There have been other people that have eaten nothing but potatoes. There was a young couple, if somebody were to Google this study in the medical literature, KON, the Con Potato Study, they weren't doing it for weight loss. They were athletes. They actually had to add oil because they were losing too much weight eating potatoes. The point was to show that you could eat nothing but potatoes and have no nutritional deficiencies, which they didn't. And there was a guy who, he wasn't vegan, but he actually spoke at one of the McDougall weekends. His name was Chris Voigt, and he was the head of the Washington Potato Commission. And he was upset when they said you could not use food stamps anymore to buy potatoes, but you could use them to buy Kool-Aid and macaroni and cheese. And so he ate nothing but potatoes. I can't remember if it was 30 days or 60 days, but like everyone else, reversed all his disease markers, lost weight. So the fact that carbs in general and potatoes specifically make people fat, that is so not true. And I'm just so tired of hearing that, because that's all I eat is carbs. And that is how I lost pounds and kept it off for 10 years, was by eating carbs.
Absolutely. I mean, when we came up with the name for our company, High Carb Health, it's purposely, anti-popular, because people look at that and like, what do you mean high carb? But that's exactly, we eat a high carbohydrate, whole food, plant-based diet. All the whole plant foods, except for some of the fatty ones, are high in carbohydrates. You can't get around that fact. All the healthy food is high in carbohydrates. You can't get around that fact.
And what do people think our ancestors ate throughout human history? They were people, carbs. I don't even like that word, but yeah, carbs are bad when they're sugar, flour, and alcohol, but not when they're complex and unrefined and unprocessed, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. But people don't seem to be able to differentiate. Like Dr. David Katz says, there's a big difference between lentils and lollipops.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so first myth is carbs make you fat. Yeah, that's not true. What are some of the other things that you get told?
I think people don't believe that they think they need a lot more fat than they do. In other words, like they're so afraid. I like how Dr. McDougall has been saying for over 40 years, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And I don't know if people just don't believe it or they want to test it for themselves, but somehow they heard like these doctors that say, our brain is made up of fat and we got to have fat. Fat, and first of all, fat and oil are two entirely different things. So if I agree, everybody needs a certain amount of fat, but that doesn't mean you need oil. No human needs oil. Cars need oil, but we don't need oil as a species. And so what people don't understand, that if there's anything magical that you feel that your body needs or your brain needs, it's in olive oil or coconut oil. Wouldn't it have had to have been in the olive and the coconut? Like, did something match? And so people don't quite understand that it's what they're seeking isn't because of this 4,000 calorie per pound fluid. If it was in the liquid, it would have been in the form that's found in nature. So I always tell people, if you're going to eat fat, eat it in its whole food form. But the reality is you don't need as much as you seem to think you need. And especially if you're struggling with weight or food addiction, you might want to just lay off it for a while, especially the oil.
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. I think I did a great chat with Dr. Malcolm Mackay and Jenny Cameron about oil. And they talk about the fact that, in Australia, 1 tablespoon of oil is 160 calories, right?
Wow.
I mean, you have 2 or 3 of those, you've almost taken up a quarter of your daily caloric requirement. And and then the main thing is that, yes, you're going to probably put on weight because it's 100% fat, but they also talked about the fact that you're displacing nutrients because these oils have no nutrition in them, or very really? tiny amounts of nutrition in them. So,
it don't make you feel full. People say, oh, if I don't eat fat, I don't feel full. I talked to Dr. Kerry Shintani, who actually is a doctor in Hawaii who bought Dr. McDougall's practice when he left Hawaii, and he wrote I believe it was called the Peace Diet. And I remember him saying that people believe that they feel fuller on fat, not because there's a magical property in fat, but because of its high caloric density, which tells me that if you're eating a high carb diet and don't feel full, you're just not eating enough calories. You see what I mean? So there's a thing called the satiety index, and I've been dying to contact the researcher. I cannot find her, Dr. Susanna Holt, but she studied all the different foods and how full a person felt after eating them. And the thing that achieved the most satiety was the boiled potato. There was nothing more filling. Fat had relatively weak satiety compared to potatoes or the complex carbohydrates. And so you won't feel hungrier if you don't eat fat, if you're eating enough calories from the starches, you know, the potatoes, rice, beans. But people seem to think like, you know, I always say to them, you know, if you have excess fat on your body, do you really think that if you did this experiment for 21 days, you could become fatty acid deficient? I mean, most people don't become fatty acid deficient in much longer than that. I mean, Dr. McDougall says he's never heard of it. And those that have say it's pretty rare, but people seem to believe that they need a lot more fat than they really need.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned an interesting thing about salt. The people are eating, you know, deep fried foods with a lot of salt, and that obviously very stimulating to your taste buds and things like that as well. But now you've been salt free for quite a while.
I'm not perfect,
not
so
100%.
You know, I don't. Well,
oh,
what
you talk about it though. I know you talk about it in your work.
Right.
That
I don't add salt to my food. I don't really like the taste of salt particularly, and I think it's a lazy way to season. But I don't want people to think like I'm perfect, because first of all, if you ever eat at somebody else's house or a restaurant, there's a good chance there's going to be salt. So, you know, for things like condiments, I will make an exception. Once in a while, I like ballpark yellow mustard in my fries, my air fries. It doesn't come salt free. Like I don't ever seek out, or if I don't have time to make my own almond milk, the box, it has a little sodium. So I'm not like, it's not like oil or sugar where like, I don't want that.
But I want to talk about it. I do want to talk about it because, you know, I'm not salt-free either by any stretch of the imagination, but I do try and reduce. And there is some really good evidence around salt, and it's harmful.
Well, it's an appetite stimulant. So it's more important for people, I think, that are food addicts or trying to lose weight, because it is a very powerful appetite stimulant. And I can send you an article that a couple of the doctors sent me, how that it contributes to what they call passive overconsumption. So people that add salt to their food generally eat about 11% more calories. And if you're trying to lose weight, that could be a lot. That could be a lot of calories. And it does stimulate the appetite. And generally when people put salt on their food, the next thing they want is sweet. So I tell people, like, if you're going to use salt, instead of using salt, why not use something that's going to give you as much salty flavor, but with a lot less sodium? So for example, there's this product that's a sea asparagus. And so it is salt because it's a sea vegetable, but it tastes exactly like salt, and it's 25% the amount of sodium. So that would be something I would tell people. It tastes like salt. It's actually green, which is kind of pretty. So if you're putting it on rice, you know, you can see these little green flecks, but it's still sodium, but it's a lot less. Or you could use something like a low sodium miso or a coconut amino. So instead of using salt, why not use these products? And the best thing I would suggest to people is just don't cook with it. Put it on the table where you let people add their own, so they can have the level of salt that they like, rather than, when you cook with it, just same with oil, like especially like in a soup, it really does dissipate. You can't taste it anymore. So why not save those milligrams of sodium for the tip of your tongue where you can really taste them, and therefore adding it at the table rather than adding it to the cooking.
That's what I really wanted to ask you, actually. What were your recommendations for reducing your sodium intake? And you've explained.
Yeah,
the sea asparagus, is it? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called, the company that I tasted it from is called Green Salt, and tasted just like salt to me. Like it's like, this is really salty.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, I can send you a link. It was really an interesting product, and for people, because not everybody's willing to give up salt. Actually, with sugar, fat, and salt, it seems like salt is the hardest for people. But I think the best way to reduce it, well, here's the best way to reduce it, is stop eating processed food, because that's, there is no salt. I mean, there's sodium in whole natural food like greens, but there's no salt. And food manufacturers hide it, just like they hide sugar. The thing about the food manufacturers is they put sugar in things that don't need to be sweet. Like, you understand, if it's an Oreo cookie, it's supposed to be sweet. You expect sugar. But why is sugar in every product? Like peanut butter does not need sugar in it. Tomato sauce does not need sugar in it, right? So they're getting you to eat more food because sugar, fat, and salt they fool the brain satiety mechanisms. They cause you to eat more. And so, I've made marinara sauce at home a gazillion times. I've never put sugar in it. If I need something a little sweet, I can use a beet, I can use a date. And with salt, believe it or not, there is more sodium in bread generally than on potato chips, because on potato chips, it's on the outside where you can see it and taste it. Bread, it's on the inside. So reducing sodium, the best thing is to stop eating so much restaurant food, processed food, and you have reduced your sodium greatly.
Absolutely. And the other thing with sodium is that it retains water weight in the body. So if you're trying to lose
Oh,
weight, you know,
yeah.
you can talk about that probably a bit more.
Yeah, that's true. And the thing is that a body, a scale that people step on doesn't differentiate between water, and even the
Mm.
ones you buy that say they do, only if you're having like the sophisticated analysis that you can get like at a healthcare professional's office, like all the bioimpedance analysis. Your bathroom
Mm.
scale cannot tell you what's bone and what's stool and what's water and what's fat. It really can't, because
Mm.
really you only lose about 2 ounces of fat a day on a whole food plant exclusive diet, eating ad libitum. And so the scale is, I mean, a scale can be accurate like month to month, but it certainly can't be accurate day to day.
No, absolutely. Okay. Now, because we've got you on here, we want to talk to you about some of the best tips you have to get people cooking a whole food plant exclusive diet without having to use the oil, because that's the one I find people struggle with the most when they talk about how do I cook without oil. So what are some of your best tips on preparing food and you know, getting yourself ready to make that shift to not using oil?
If you can, get an air fryer, because especially if you like crispy, crunchy food, an air fryer can do magic. You can take things like chickpeas, and of course you can roast things in ovens, and ovens are not a terrible way to cook at all. But what's nice about an air fryer, especially if you can afford a high-end one like the Breville, is that it's quicker. It takes less time, for example, and you can make the crispiest French fries, chickpeas, roasted chickpeas, if you like crunch to your food, that normally people rely on oil for. So that's what's a really cool thing to do. I didn't always have an air fryer, but now that I have one, I do love to use it, because I just think food tastes amazing in it. So that's one thing you can do. I like to use the Instant Pot. Even when recipes say, oh, you have to put oil in, you really don't. The thing is, people have to understand, unless you're frying food, which is not healthy, deep frying, I mean, not air frying, you don't need oil to cook. You need usually a liquid, but it doesn't, there's nothing magical about oil. And the thing is, when people really understand this oil thing and they stop using oil, it's almost like their taste buds rejuvenate and regenerate, because oil actually, it doesn't really enhance the flavor of food, because when the more oil you use, the more salt you use. Oil actually coats the tongue, the taste buds of the tongue. And so you don't really taste the food. And when you stop using it, you save money, because oil can be expensive. You save calories, because we know now it's 160 calories per tablespoon or 4,000 calories per pound. And you save a lot of time on cleanup, because cleaning, I used to work at a restaurant, and the dishes with the oil would be just like, you'd have to soak them and run them through that machine. When you stop using oil, the cleanup is so much easier. So when it comes to, say, for example, sauteing, you don't have to saute in oil. You can saute in broth. You can saute in water. I've sauteed in pineapple juice. I've sauteed in balsamic vinegar. You maybe need a little bit of liquid, not a lot, but there's nothing magical about oil. And there's a technique that I use. It's called dry sauteing, where you get a very good pan, either a nonstick one or a ceramic coated one or stainless steel, and you start the pan and you're sauteing with nothing in it, and then the onion starts to brown. And when you feel like, hey, this is going to stick, a tablespoon of water at a time. There's lots of videos on YouTube, including on my channel, that show that. But you can caramelize an onion. You don't need oil. And I don't know, it's like such an entrenched belief. And I really think that this love affair we have with oil is really a triumph of marketing over science, because it's just, those of us that don't eat oil or haven't eaten oil in a long time, we just think, like, we don't get it. This is crazy. And I haven't had oil on purpose in I don't know, 15 years. But if I did get it, I mean, when I've gotten it, like, I don't know, like it's been on the grill, it actually makes me physically sick. It's like, I've heard that oil in high doses can be an emetic, making people vomit. So I mean, that's, to me, whether you're trying to lose weight or just get healthy, nobody needs oil. If you want fat, eat nuts, eat seeds, avocado. I'm never going to understand why people love oil so much. I think it's gross. I mean, I really think it's gross.
Yeah, I struggled. I mean, obviously, I haven't had oil on purpose for more than 9 years now. And when you do get it, you get this kind of slimy, on your lips, and you're like, what is this stuff? And you're like, oh, because you're not used to that anymore. Whereas in the past, that would have been very, lots of it in our food, in the past. So I guess, from that perspective, it's really fascinating. And yeah, I don't get it either. So The next thing I want to talk to you about is some bits of advice for people who are making the shift to, or thinking about making the shift to being on a plant exclusive diet. I'm going to start using that. I think that's really cool.
I love it. I started doing that a long time ago. I remember exactly where I was. I don't remember the name of the restaurant. It was an outdoor restaurant in New York with Victoria Moran. And I said, I don't like plant-based because it doesn't tell me what I eat. I'm plant exclusive. So yeah, thank you. You know, I think I love this idea that Dr. Doug Lisle talks about running experiments, because people don't like the idea of giving things up. And if somebody says, "Oh, never eat, you know, a cheeseburger again or pepperoni pizza or whatever," it doesn't generally work. People don't like the idea of giving things up. So I tell people, do an experiment. And I like to tell them 21 days. And the reason is because there's a holiday called Lent where people have historically given things up that they love very much for almost 6 weeks. 40 days is close to being 42 days. They've given up sex, they've given up coffee, alcohol, chocolate, whatever it is. And people have been able to do that in the name of their religion. And so I figured divide Lent into half, but add 1 day because, you know, weeks are 7 days. And just for 21 days, do an experiment and see how you feel. And if you don't feel better or notice any changes or improvements on day 22, you can go back. But I haven't met the person who hasn't. Now, sometimes at the beginning, especially if they're really sugar addicted or something, you know, they might detox. But I'm not telling people not to get sugar right away. We're talking about adopting a plant exclusive diet. And so the idea is just do it, you know, like have a meatless Monday for 21 days and see how it is. But a lot of people, you know, you can start them off in a different direction too. And instead of telling them what they can't have, tell them what they can have, which is fruits and vegetables. And this is why, you know, I didn't start eating healthfully after a 26-year being junk food vegan on year 27. I transitioned more towards, you know, first thing I did is I started having fruit smoothies. You know, I was having Coke Slurpees for breakfast. And so now I eat vegetables for breakfast, like steamed vegetables, but I didn't go from Coke Slurpee to steamed vegetables. It took me years to kind of transition. And first thing I did was I started having fruit smoothies at Jamba Juice, which you know, I think they're very healthy, but green smoothies are even healthier because but I couldn't have kale in a smoothie, you know, but if I'm having a Coke Slurpee with 8 pumps of vanilla syrup, and now I'm having a fruit smoothie with bananas and blueberries, you know, that's pretty sweet too. So that was a real good transition for me. And then after a while, it was like, well, you know what? I don't need it this sweet. So now let's put some spinach in it, and let's make the smoothie healthier. I was even putting cocoa powder in at the beginning, anything you get in more vegetables. So whatever it takes, you know, the thing is most people aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables, whether they're vegan or not. They just aren't. And so I think it's good advice to find ways by any greens necessary to get people to eat more fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables. It's not that hard to get most people to eat fruit. Fruit's pretty delicious, especially when it's in season, cherries and watermelons. But find ways to get more, you know, I like this saying of invite plants to every meal. Find ways to get half your plate be fruits or vegetables at every meal, regardless of what else you're eating.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, it's you're not giving up the meals that you love. You're just swapping ingredients, you know, like, you know, swap beef for beans or chicken for chickpeas or something like that. You know, you can make the same curry, but just change what's in it, you know.
It's the sauce is key. And like you say, find what you already love. If you love pizza, you can have a plant exclusive pizza. I mean, there's cheese now that tastes just like cheese. Miyoko Shinder makes a whole bunch of cheeses. There's Daiya cheese. So you can have what you love, but without the animal products. If you love shepherd's pie, like you say, you can put in lentils instead of lamb. You still got the mashed potatoes on top. So there are ways to make plants extremely delicious. I'm trying to think what, you know, it's never been easier in human history to find what you love in the animal-based world and the plant-based world. It's not always as healthy as having, you know, sweet potatoes and broccoli, but hey, I've never had these, but you know, they've got Impossible Burgers and Beyond Meat and all kinds of chicken and fish now. That, I mean, they're not real chicken and fish, thank goodness. But if that's what you have to have at the beginning, you can have that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many transition options. I mean, let's talk about this, because I mean, if you've been on, you know, eating plants for 40 something years, and you know, 35 years ago,
Like
compared to the options now. Talk to me what the landscape was like back then.
That's why when people I want to smack them when they say it's so hard to be vegan now. Really, go back to time travel yourself back to 1977. There was not even plant milk. There wasn't, now you can go to Walmart anywhere at least in the United States, and you're going to find not just almond milk, but soy milk and coconut milk and hemp milk and quinoa milk and flax milk and pea milk. And I mean, oat milk. And I mean, there's more walnut milk and pecan milk. I mean, pistachio milk. And I mean, it's unbelievable. Banana milk. You wouldn't believe like the amount of milk, not real, cow's milk in a box. We didn't have that. We didn't even have powdered soy milk. The only plant processed food I remember in the 70s, and you can only get it like in an Adventist bookstore, was they had Worthington, I think was the brand, and they had like these fake canned meats high in salt and fat, like fake meat in a can. There wasn't anything back then. Nothing.
What did you do?
Well, what a normal person would have done is eat what I eat now: sweet potatoes, broccoli, beans, rice, fruit. I ate junk because, Slurpees are vegan. Coke is vegan. Dr. Pepper's vegan. There's a lot of junk food. Chips are vegan. Cotton candy's vegan. Gummy bears are. I ate a lot of processed food. So I was doing it for ethical reasons, though. So I was just removing animals. I just didn't get the memo to include the plants. I got it, but I got it at the age of 43.
Fantastic. I think I remember when we first went vegan or plant exclusive. There was one restaurant in New Zealand, because we were in New Zealand at the time. There was one restaurant in New Zealand that you could go to. Now there's so many of them. There's so many. You probably see huge amounts all over the world, and the movement's growing so fast. You must be amazed at seeing how much progress has been.
I cannot believe how fast it's grown. And I was thinking, like, what's nice about plant exclusive, it's nice to be exclusive. It's part of an exclusive. Plant exclusive. Yeah. I've heard plant predominant, plant strong, plant forward. It's all right, but I completely plants I like that better.
All right. So thank you so much for sharing all this information with us today, Chef AJ. I'd like to finish this session with, I guess, just sharing, some little bits of advice for people who are watching that may be wanting to shift their diet or improve their health. Like, what are some of the things that you would maybe have said to yourself way back then when you were first starting out? Like, now that you've had 40 plus years of experience doing this.
Yeah, I would say, remember, we didn't have internet back then. And it was a lot harder to connect with people, right? So I would say now, just get some support, and whatever that looks like to you, whether it's in meetup.com, if you have that in your country, or a Facebook group. But I find that now, because so many other people are doing it, it's a lot easier if you have company, and and you can do that now. I didn't know a single vegan in 1977 at the University of Pennsylvania, let alone a vegetarian. So if you can find a friend, a buddy, whether it's for accountability or support, to do it with you, I think it'd be a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. So that would be my biggest piece of advice, and is to find support, find community, because you need it, because there's too many other people that are going to tell you, meat's good, alcohol's good, and you gotta pour olive oil over everything. So find a like-minded community. That is
fantastic. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me here today. For everyone who's listening to this on the podcast, please make sure you share this with as many people as you can, so that they can understand and learn about this amazing information that Chef AJ just shared with us. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button, give Chef AJ a like, and also head over to Chef AJ's channel. She has amazing people on every day, isn't it? You're doing a show almost every day.
I'm almost at by the time this airs, I'll have passed my 1000th episode, but I haven't missed a day since 2022. Live every day, 11 a.m.
every day. Amazing. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please hit that subscribe button and the little bell notification icon, so you get notified of every new upload. And if you have any questions, there's a comment section down below, so type away, ask any question that you want, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed listening to the amazing information that Chef AJ showed, not only theoretical information about the plant-based diet, but also the practical tips about cooking and how to make your diet more palatable. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, all I have to say now is make sure you eat plants and lots of them. Take care, everyone.